The courtroom was quiet except for the soft rustle of papers and the occasional cough. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. People were seated in the benches, whispering softly among themselves. Some were lawyers, some were clerks, and some were simply curious spectators who had come to witness the proceedings. All eyes were on the front, where the judge, an older man with a stern expression, presided over the room. A young boy walked into the courtroom, his steps careful and measured. He looked like any other teenager. His clothes were plain, his hair a little messy, and his face carried the nervous energy of someone stepping into a place where they did not quite belong. He held a folder in his hands and paused for a moment, taking a deep breath before moving forward. The people around him stole glances, whispering to each other. Who was this boy, they wondered, standing here in a courtroom full of adults? The boy walked up to the front, his eyes steady but his hands slightly trembling. The judge glanced down at him with an expression that mixed curiosity and amusement. He leaned back slightly in his chair, looking the boy up and down. "Well," the judge said in a tone that carried a hint of mockery. "And what do we have here?" "A young gentleman stepping into the courtroom as if he belongs here. Are you sure you are in the right place, son?" The boy did not respond immediately. He simply looked at the judge with calm eyes, and a small polite nod acknowledged the question. The judge's lips curved into a small smirk. The courtroom murmured. Some people chuckled softly, thinking this would be entertaining. Others were curious to see how the boy would handle the subtle teasing. "You must have come a long way," the judge continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Do you have a lawyer with you? Or are you planning to argue your own case?" The courtroom filled with quiet laughter. It was clear that everyone expected the boy to falter, to stumble over his words and to reveal that he did not belong here. The boy opened his folder slowly, revealing papers neatly organized inside. He cleared his throat gently and began to speak. His voice was calm and measured, carrying a quiet confidence that surprised some in the room. "Your Honor," he said, "I am here to represent my case, and I am fully prepared to present my arguments." A few heads in the courtroom tilted in surprise. The boy's voice did not carry the tremor of nervousness one might expect from someone so young. There was something in his tone that suggested he was ready, that he knew what he was doing. The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but still skeptical. "Very well," the judge said slowly. "We shall see. Tell me, young man, what exactly is the matter you are here to address?" He leaned forward slightly, trying to catch any sign of hesitation or confusion. The boy took a moment, flipping through his papers carefully. "This case involves a dispute over property boundaries. I have prepared all the relevant documents and evidence, and I am confident that my arguments will clarify the situation clearly and fairly." The courtroom was quiet, the whispers dying down as people listened. The judge shifted in his chair, studying the boy more closely. He had expected uncertainty, but instead he saw composure and preparation. The boy continued, speaking with clarity and focus, describing the situation step by step. He referenced documents, explained diagrams, and outlined the timeline in a way that was easy to follow. As he spoke, the courtroom began to pay closer attention. The spectators leaned forward in their seats, intrigued by the unexpected display of knowledge and confidence. Even some of the lawyers exchanged glances, recognizing that this young man was presenting his case with an understanding of the law that seemed unusual for someone his age. The judge, still cautious, decided to test him. "And where did you learn all of this, young man? Did someone help you prepare? Or are you claiming to know all of this on your own?" His tone was firm, a challenge hidden behind the question. The boy looked up, his expression calm and earnest. "Your Honor, I have studied this matter thoroughly on my own. I have also had guidance from mentors in the legal field, but every argument I will present today is my own. I am here to ensure that justice is served regardless of my age or appearance." There was a moment of silence. The judge did not speak immediately. He studied the boy, and the courtroom held its breath. The young man's composure and confidence were not what they had expected. He was not intimidated, and he was not faltering under scrutiny. In fact, the more he spoke, the more it became clear that he understood the law deeply. The judge leaned back in his chair, his smirk fading into a look of mild surprise. He had underestimated the boy. This was not the nervous teenager he had expected. This was someone who had prepared meticulously, someone who had thought through every angle. The courtroom began to sense that the boy was not just competent, he was exceptional. The boy continued to present his case, carefully pointing out errors in the opposing argument and explaining why his position was valid. He spoke with patience, never rushing, ensuring that everyone in the courtroom could understand his points. Each argument was logical and well supported, demonstrating not only knowledge but a level of critical thinking that impressed even the seasoned adults in the room. As he spoke, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. What had started as a scene of quiet amusement had transformed into one of genuine interest and respect. The spectators stopped whispering and listened intently. Even the lawyers on the other side began to recognize the boy's skill, nodding slightly at the clarity of his reasoning. By the time he finished his opening remarks, there was a sense of anticipation in the air. The judge, who had started the day with a tone of mockery, now regarded the boy with a mixture of curiosity and caution. He realized that he could no longer judge this young man by his age or appearance alone. There was more here than met the eye, and it was becoming increasingly clear that the teenager before him might have a brilliance that exceeded expectations. The boy gathered his papers carefully, closed his folder, and gave a polite nod to the judge. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said. "I am ready to answer any questions or provide further clarification as needed." The judge, still absorbing the situation, cleared his throat. "Very well. We will proceed carefully. I admit I did not expect this level of preparation from someone so young, but I look forward to seeing how you handle the questioning." The boy nodded again, composed and calm. The courtroom was now fully attentive, no longer viewing him as just a teenager, but as someone who might surprise them in ways they had not anticipated. The whispers had stopped, replaced by a quiet sense of respect and curiosity. The stage was set for the events to come, and the boy, in his quiet confidence, seemed ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. As the proceedings continued, it became clear that this would not be an ordinary day in court. The teenager's presence, initially mocked and underestimated, had shifted the focus of everyone in the room. What had started as a simple hearing was transforming into a story of unexpected talent, preparation, and quiet brilliance. And at the center of it all stood a young man who seemed ordinary at first glance, but whose mind and determination were anything but ordinary. The judge leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied the young boy who had just presented himself so confidently. There was a quiet murmur in the courtroom as spectators and lawyers alike exchanged glances. Many could not hide their surprise. The boy, seemingly ordinary in appearance, had already begun to demonstrate a depth of understanding that was unusual for someone his age. The judge, however, was not fully convinced and decided to press further. "Tell me, young man," the judge began, his voice carrying a mixture of amusement and skepticism, "are you truly prepared to defend yourself in this matter? Or is this some exercise orchestrated by your mentors?" He looked at the boy as if expecting a fumble, a sign of uncertainty. The boy straightened, his voice calm, steady, and respectful. "Your Honor, I am prepared to handle this matter on my own. I have studied the case extensively, and am confident in the accuracy of my documents and arguments. I understand that age does not excuse errors, and I intend to present my case thoroughly and clearly." His words carried weight, more than anyone could have expected from someone so young. A small chuckle escaped the judge, more from disbelief than amusement. "Well, this is highly unusual. I have seen many cases, but rarely has someone of your age stood before me ready to argue with such seriousness. Are you certain you understand the procedures and expectations of this courtroom?" The judge's tone was sharp, probing yet not unkind. The boy nodded respectfully. "Yes, Your Honor. I understand that every detail is important, and I have prepared for every aspect of this case. I have reviewed all necessary procedures, and I am aware of the expectations of the court." The judge leaned forward slightly, tapping his fingers on the wooden surface of his desk. "Very well. Let us proceed then. I would like to hear the details of your argument in full. Be thorough but precise." The boy took a deep breath and began. He presented his case step by step, speaking in a voice that was measured yet confident. He referred to legal documents, explained diagrams, and cited laws and precedents in a way that made the courtroom sit up and pay attention. His arguments were logical, clear, and comprehensive, leaving little room for doubt or misunderstanding. As he spoke, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Where there had once been whispers and quiet laughter, there was now silence and keen attention. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, absorbing every word. Lawyers who had initially doubted the boy's abilities found themselves taking notes and nodding at the clarity of his reasoning. The judge's expression softened, his amusement replaced by cautious respect. One of the lawyers on the opposing side tried to interrupt, assuming that the boy would falter under questioning. "Objection, Your Honor," the lawyer said, expecting the boy to stumble. "I do not believe someone of this age can fully understand the intricacies of the case." The boy did not flinch. He looked directly at the lawyer and replied, calmly and confidently, "Your objection is noted, but I am fully capable of presenting my argument and responding to questions based on the facts and legal principles involved. Age does not determine understanding or competence. If permitted, I will address the points in question." The courtroom fell silent again. The judge regarded the boy with interest, clearly impressed by the young man's composure and intelligence. He realized that he could no longer view this as a simple exercise or a novelty. The boy was presenting himself as a serious, capable participant in the proceedings. The judge decided to test him further. "Very well," he said. "Let us see how well you can handle counter-arguments. The opposing side may present objections and challenges, and I want to see your responses. Are you ready?" The boy nodded, placing his hands carefully on the folder in front of him. "Yes, Your Honor. I am ready to address any questions or objections." The lawyer from the opposing side rose, attempting to question the boy with complex points designed to confuse or intimidate. But the boy remained calm, answering each point with precision and clarity. He explained legal principles, provided evidence from the documents he had prepared, and responded to hypothetical situations with logical reasoning. His arguments were not only correct, but also easy for everyone in the courtroom to understand. As the questioning continued, the judge's eyes widened slightly. He had expected hesitation, perhaps even mistakes, but the boy navigated each challenge with remarkable skill. The courtroom audience watched in astonishment. Some whispered quietly to one another, trying to process what they were seeing. Here was a teenager facing experienced lawyers, handling objections with the confidence and knowledge of someone much older. The boy's ability to remain composed under scrutiny, to respond thoughtfully and accurately, began to change the perception of everyone present. The initial mockery, the underestimation based on age, was slowly giving way to respect. Even the judge, who had started the proceedings with a tone of skepticism and amusement, found himself reconsidering his assumptions. The boy continued, explaining each point in detail, never rushing, ensuring that the logic of his argument was clear. He anticipated questions before they were asked, providing clarifications that strengthened his position. He showed a deep understanding of the law, a level of preparation and intellect that left no room for doubt about his abilities. By the time he concluded this part of the proceedings, the courtroom was silent. The judge leaned back, his fingers steepled under his chin, studying the boy intently. There was a sense of realization on his face. He had underestimated this young man, and he had been proven wrong. The boy carefully gathered his papers, placing them neatly in his folder. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said, his tone respectful and composed. "I am ready to continue as directed and respond to any further inquiries." The judge, now fully attentive and serious, nodded slowly. "Very well," he said. "I must admit, I did not expect such a level of preparation and understanding. We will proceed carefully, and I expect full engagement from both sides." The courtroom, which had started with amusement and curiosity, had shifted completely. The young boy, who had once been the subject of mild mockery, was now commanding respect. His intelligence, preparation, and composure had begun to reshape the opinions of everyone present. As the proceedings continued, it became clear that this was no ordinary case. What had started as a routine matter was evolving into a story of talent, preparation, and unexpected brilliance. The boy's performance had left a lasting impression on the judge, the lawyers, and the spectators alike. Each person in the courtroom now watched with keen interest, eager to see what he would do next. The boy remained composed, confident, but respectful, demonstrating that intelligence and determination can often defy expectations. His presence challenged assumptions, quietly teaching the courtroom a lesson about judging ability based on appearances. As the judge continued to observe him closely, it became evident that this teenager was not merely participating in the proceedings. He was shaping the courtroom experience itself, leaving a trail of curiosity, admiration, and quiet astonishment in his wake. The courtroom had grown quiet as the young boy began to demonstrate not just his knowledge, but his extraordinary skill in argumentation. He had already gained the attention of the judge, the lawyers, and the spectators, but what was about to unfold would completely redefine their expectations. The opposing counsel tried one more time to throw a curveball. He presented a complex legal scenario, hoping to catch the boy off guard. "Your Honor," the lawyer said, "this situation requires nuanced understanding of multiple precedents and cross-references. How does the young gentleman intend to address this challenge?" The boy took a deep breath and opened his folder carefully. His eyes scanned the documents and then, with calm authority, he began to speak. "Your Honor, if I may," he said, "the scenario presented involves several elements that must be considered individually before forming a holistic conclusion. Allow me to break down each element systematically." As he spoke, the courtroom leaned in. His tone was steady, his words precise, and his reasoning clear. He cited previous cases that were relevant, explaining each one in simple, understandable terms. He connected the dots between statutes and legal principles with a fluency that surprised everyone. Even the opposing lawyer, who had expected to dominate this exchange, found himself listening in astonishment. The teenager was dissecting complex legal arguments with ease, demonstrating an understanding that went far beyond what anyone could have expected from someone of his age. The judge, initially skeptical, leaned forward in his chair, eyes widening. He had seen many lawyers in his long career, but the clarity and depth of reasoning presented by someone so young was unlike anything he had witnessed before. He could feel a mix of shock and admiration building inside him. The courtroom, too, had become completely silent, all attention focused on the young boy. The boy continued, presenting each point with careful explanation. He anticipated potential objections and addressed them before they could even be raised. He was methodical, patient, and confident, never rushing, ensuring that every listener could follow the logic of his arguments. Each statement reinforced his credibility and intelligence, leaving no room for doubt. Spectators whispered among themselves quietly, some shaking their heads in disbelief. "How can someone so young know so much?" one whispered. Another nodded, unable to hide the expression of amazement. Even experienced lawyers were silently impressed, taking mental notes of the teenager's tactics and presentation style. The judge decided to test him one final time. "Very well, young man," he said, his voice controlled but curious. "Let us see how well you handle a direct challenge. Consider a situation where the facts may appear to contradict your argument. How would you reconcile this while maintaining a valid legal position?" The boy paused briefly, flipping through his documents and thinking carefully. "Your Honor," he began, "it is true that certain facts may appear contradictory on the surface, but when we analyze them in context and reference the applicable statutes, the situation becomes clear. Allow me to demonstrate how these facts align with the principles of law. Maintaining both consistency and fairness," he proceeded to explain, step by step, how each apparent contradiction could be understood in context. He referenced specific legal cases, explained how courts had interpreted similar situations in the past, and showed how the principles of justice applied to the current scenario. His explanation was not only accurate but also logical and accessible, making a potentially confusing issue clear for everyone in the courtroom. By now, the judge was visibly impressed, almost speechless. The boy's ability to navigate complex legal scenarios with confidence and precision was unlike anything he had seen before. He realized that he had been mistaken in underestimating the teenager. This was no ordinary young person. This was someone with exceptional intelligence and preparation. The courtroom began to sense the shift. What had started as mild amusement and curiosity was now awe and respect. The spectators, lawyers, and even court staff were captivated. The boy's skill in presenting complex arguments, responding to challenges, and maintaining composure under pressure was extraordinary. The opposing lawyer attempted another interruption, hoping to regain control, but the boy anticipated the objection. He responded calmly, citing legal principles and precedents that supported his position. His argument was so clear and authoritative that the lawyer had no choice but to pause, re-evaluating the situation. The judge, now fully attentive, leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. He was studying the teenager intently, no longer able to dismiss him as a mere novelty. There was something remarkable about this young man, something that demanded recognition and respect. The boy continued, carefully reviewing his evidence and presenting his conclusions. Each point was logical, supported, and clearly articulated. He made sure that every aspect of the case was addressed, leaving nothing to chance. His preparation and intelligence were evident in every sentence, every gesture, every reference he made. By the time he concluded his argument, the courtroom was in a state of silent admiration. The judge, the lawyers, and the spectators were all aware that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The young boy, who had been underestimated from the moment he entered the room, had completely transformed the perception of everyone present. He gathered his papers carefully, placing them back in his folder, and looked at the judge respectfully. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said. "I am ready to answer any questions or provide further clarification as required." The judge took a moment before responding. "I must admit," he said slowly, "I did not expect this level of insight and preparation from someone so young. You have handled the challenges presented today with remarkable skill. We will continue with the proceedings, but it is clear that you are not just capable, you are exceptional." The courtroom was filled with quiet murmurs of admiration. The boy had not only defended himself, but had demonstrated legal brilliance beyond his years. The judge's tone, once skeptical and mocking, now carried respect and cautious acknowledgement. The young boy's presence had already begun to leave a lasting impression. What had begun as a routine hearing was now an extraordinary demonstration of intelligence, preparation, and composure. The courtroom had become a stage where a young, seemingly ordinary teenager had revealed a depth of skill and understanding that stunned everyone present. The boy remained calm, aware of the attention he had earned, but focused on the proceedings. He knew that the next stages of the case would bring further challenges, and he was prepared to face them with the same careful preparation and logical reasoning that had already impressed the judge and the courtroom. As the session continued, it became increasingly clear that this young man was not only capable of handling the situation, but might even excel beyond expectation. Each observer in the courtroom recognized that they were witnessing the emergence of a rare talent, someone whose intellect and confidence defied assumptions based on age or appearance. The boy's careful presentation of complex legal arguments had not only strengthened his position in the case, but had also begun to reshape the attitudes of everyone in the room. The initial mockery and underestimation were giving way to respect and curiosity. Every person present was now eager to see what he would do next, understanding that his abilities went far beyond what anyone had anticipated. The teenager's performance in this stage of the case was nothing short of extraordinary. His skillful handling of objections, his clear and logical explanations, and his composed demeanor had transformed the courtroom. The judge, lawyers, and spectators all recognized that this young man was not simply participating. He was redefining what was possible in the courtroom, challenging expectations, and leaving an unforgettable impression on everyone present. The atmosphere inside the courtroom had completely changed. Where there was once quiet laughter and disbelief, there was now deep attention and admiration. The judge, who had mocked the teenager in the beginning, now sat upright, focused on every word the boy spoke. The lawyers, who once thought this hearing would be an easy victory, found themselves uneasy. And the spectators, many of whom had come expecting an ordinary case, now felt like they were watching history unfold. The young boy stood calmly, his folder in hand, his voice steady as he continued to explain his points. There was no sign of arrogance in his tone, only quiet confidence and respect. He never spoke too fast or too loud. Every word was carefully chosen, every sentence delivered with purpose. Even the smallest detail seemed important to him. The judge finally raised a hand, signaling him to pause. "You've made quite a series of strong arguments," the judge said, his voice more thoughtful now than before. "But I have to ask you something. How is it that someone your age has learned so much about the law? It's not something people just pick up by chance." The boy hesitated for a moment. The room grew quiet again. He looked at the judge respectfully and replied, "Your Honor, I've always believed that age should never limit what someone can learn. I've been studying law since I was very young. I read books, attended open court sessions, and had mentors who guided me in understanding the basics. But most of all, I observed. I watched how justice was served and how people presented truth in front of others. That's how I learned. The judge nodded slowly. His earlier smirk had completely disappeared. Now there was something else in his expression, curiosity mixed with respect. "So, you've done this all on your own?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor," the boy said simply. "I wanted to prove that knowledge isn't about how old someone is. It's about how much effort they put into learning." There was a soft murmur among the people seated in the courtroom. Some smiled quietly, others nodded in agreement. The young boy's words carried more than logic. They carried wisdom beyond his years. The opposing lawyer, however, still looked uneasy. He stood up, trying one last time to challenge the boy. "Your Honor," he said, "while this young man is certainly impressive, I must insist that we verify his credentials. The court has procedures for representation. If he claims to be qualified, then the record should show it." The judge looked at the lawyer and then turned his eyes toward the boy. "That is a fair point," the judge said. "Young man, do you have any credentials to show?" The boy nodded and reached into his folder. He pulled out a sealed envelope and handed it to the bailiff, who brought it to the judge. The judge carefully opened it, expecting perhaps a permission letter or some document of mentorship, but as he unfolded the papers inside, his eyes widened. It was official. The boy was indeed licensed to practice law. The document bore all the signatures and seals that proved its authenticity. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't just a smart teenager who knew some legal terms. He was a certified attorney, having passed his exams far earlier than anyone thought possible. For a long moment, the judge didn't speak. The courtroom was completely silent. Then, in a voice that carried both surprise and admiration, he said, This is extraordinary. I can hardly believe what I'm reading." Whispers spread quickly among the people in the courtroom. The spectators could hardly contain their amazement. Even the opposing lawyer was speechless for a few seconds before finally saying, "Your Honor, if that is true, then I withdraw any doubts about his capability. I simply did not expect such a thing." The judge leaned back in his chair, still holding the paper. He looked at the boy again, this time with genuine respect. "You've proven something remarkable today," he said. "Not just your intelligence, but your patience and humility. Many people in this courtroom, including myself, underestimated you, and you have reminded us all that true talent has no age." The boy bowed his head slightly, his expression humble. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said softly. "I didn't come here to prove anything about myself. I just wanted to handle my case with honesty and fairness." The judge smiled faintly. "And you've done exactly that," he said. "You have earned this court's respect." A light round of applause began in the back of the courtroom, before quickly spreading through the room. It wasn't loud or chaotic. It was the kind of slow, genuine applause that came from admiration. The judge allowed it for a brief moment before signaling for silence again. But even then, the warmth in the air didn't fade. The opposing lawyer walked over to the boy after the session was paused for recess. "You're remarkable," he said, shaking his head. "I've been practicing law for years, and I've never seen anyone, let alone someone your age, handle a courtroom like that." The boy smiled modestly. "Thank you, sir. I still have much to learn. Every case is a lesson." The lawyer nodded thoughtfully. "You're right about that. But you've taught us all something today." When the court resumed after recess, the energy in the room was different. Everyone seemed eager to hear what would happen next. The judge, now clearly respectful toward the boy, addressed him with professionalism rather than sarcasm. "We will continue with your presentation," he said. "Please proceed." The boy continued explaining the final parts of his case, showing evidence, presenting witnesses, and calmly addressing every question that arose. He spoke with the same clarity and honesty he had maintained from the beginning. Every time he spoke, people listened carefully, not just because of his age, but because his words carried meaning and sincerity. The judge occasionally nodded in agreement, asking thoughtful questions to better understand certain details. Each time the boy answered with accuracy and humility, proving again and again that he belonged there. By the end of the session, the case was leaning heavily in the boy's favor. Even the opposing side quietly admitted that his evidence and reasoning were difficult to challenge. The judge knew that a decision was near, but before concluding, he wanted to say something. He looked directly at the boy and said, "Before we close this matter, I want to acknowledge what we've all witnessed today. This young man has displayed not only intelligence but also patience, respect, and commitment to truth. In this courtroom, we often see people argue with pride or anger, but rarely do we see someone argue with such calm focus and sincerity. It's a reminder that justice is not about age or position, it's about integrity." The courtroom was silent again. The boy's eyes lowered slightly, humbled by the words. He nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Your Honor, that means a lot to me." The judge smiled gently. "It should, because I believe you have a very bright future ahead of you. The world needs more minds like yours, sharp, but guided by kindness and fairness." The court concluded for the day, and as people began to leave, many stopped to congratulate the boy or simply shake his hand. Even those who didn't speak to him watched him with admiration, whispering about how they had just witnessed something extraordinary. When the boy finally stepped out of the courtroom, the sunlight outside felt different. It was warm, welcoming, and calm. He took a deep breath, looking up at the sky for a moment. It wasn't pride that filled his heart, it was gratitude. He had come here not to prove himself, but to do what he believed was right. And in doing so, he had changed the minds of everyone who doubted him. As he walked down the courthouse steps, a small group of reporters approached him, curious about his story. One of them asked, "How does it feel to be the youngest attorney to ever handle a case like this successfully?" The boy smiled politely and said, "I don't think of it that way. I just wanted to make sure justice was served. That's all that matters to me." The reporter smiled. "That's a wise answer for someone your age." He nodded, his voice calm as he replied, "Maybe wisdom isn't about age either." That line stayed with everyone who heard it. It was simple but powerful, a reflection of the same quiet strength he had shown in the courtroom. As the boy walked away, people couldn't help but admire him. They knew that one day his name would be remembered in the legal world, not just for his talent but for his humility and heart. Inside the courthouse, the judge sat alone for a few moments before leaving. He looked around the empty courtroom and smiled to himself. "A genius in disguise," he whispered quietly. Then, shaking his head in wonder, he added, "And I almost mocked him out of this room." The story of that day would spread quickly. People would talk about the teenager who had entered the courtroom as a boy and left as a respected attorney. But for the boy himself, it wasn't about fame. It was about proving that knowledge, respect, and fairness could make a difference no matter how young or old someone was. He walked home that day quietly, holding his folder close, the same folder that had carried all his hard work. The world felt a little bigger, a little kinder, and a lot more possible. And deep down he knew this was just the beginning. The next day the courtroom was filled again. The same curious faces returned, eager to see how the story of the mysterious young genius would unfold. The air was thick with quiet excitement. Even the judge seemed different, calmer, more respectful, yet deeply intrigued. He knew this was no ordinary case anymore. Something about the boy's calm confidence and brilliant mind had touched everyone who had witnessed the last session. The boy arrived early, just as he always did. He carried his folder neatly under his arm and walked with the same quiet assurance. His expression was composed, yet there was a faint trace of determination in his eyes. He had spent the night reviewing every note, every detail, making sure he was ready for whatever challenges would come his way. When the hearing began, the opposing lawyer, who had once been dismissive, now carried himself differently too. He no longer looked at the teenager as an opponent to mock, but as a professional he needed to compete against seriously. The judge began the session, his tone more formal now. "We will continue from where we left off yesterday," he said. "Let both parties proceed with their arguments." The boy nodded respectfully and stood up. He began to speak, explaining his position clearly and calmly. His words flowed naturally, his logic sharp and structured. Every statement had purpose. Every pause had weight. His arguments were not just intelligent, they were deeply human. focusing on fairness, empathy, and justice. He spoke not like someone trying to win, but like someone trying to do what was right. As the session continued, the boy presented evidence that surprised everyone. He had discovered inconsistencies in the opposing counsel's claims and quietly built his counter-arguments around them. One by one, he revealed these details, each revelation tightening his case like a puzzle coming together perfectly. The courtroom could feel the shift happening again. What had begun as amusement had turned into amazement, and now it was respect mixed with admiration. The judge nodded slowly as he listened. The boy was not just speaking facts, he was explaining them with clarity and compassion. His tone was never arrogant, never condescending. He was teaching through calm wisdom. At one point, the opposing lawyer asked sharply, "And how exactly did you come across these findings?" He was hoping to find a flaw, a weakness in the teenager's preparation. The boy smiled slightly. "By reading carefully," he said softly. "Sometimes the answers hide between the lines." The courtroom chuckled gently. Even the judge allowed himself a small smile. It was not mockery, it was admiration. The young man's humility combined with his brilliance had won over even those who had doubted him the most. The hearing went on for hours. Every question was met with a thoughtful answer. Every challenge was handled with grace. The boy's calm voice filled the courtroom with a kind of quiet power that no one could deny. It was not just his knowledge that impressed people. It was his maturity, his patience, and the kindness behind his reasoning. When the time came for closing arguments, the judge looked at the boy. "You may proceed," he said, his voice softer than usual. The boy took a breath and stepped forward. "Your Honor," he began, "this case is not only about legal points and technical details. It is about what is fair. It is about what we stand for as a society: truth, justice, and compassion. Laws are written to protect people, not to confuse them. And I believe that when we look closely at the facts, that truth becomes clear." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The courtroom was silent. Everyone was listening. He continued, "I am not here to show that I know more than anyone else. I am here because I believe that even the smallest voice deserves to be heard, and that fairness should never depend on age, position, or power. What matters is what is right." His words carried sincerity that touched everyone in the room. Even the opposing lawyer lowered his gaze for a moment, reflecting on the honesty in the boy's tone. When the boy finished, he quietly placed his notes down and looked at the judge with respect. "That is all, Your Honor." The judge sat in silence for a long moment. He tapped his pen lightly against the desk, then set it down. "I have presided over hundreds of cases," he began, his voice thoughtful. "But I cannot remember the last time I felt so deeply moved by a presentation. You have demonstrated not only intelligence and preparation, but also heart and integrity." He looked directly at the young man. "When you first entered this courtroom, I admit I did not take you seriously. I thought you were a boy playing a part, but you have proven me wrong in every possible way. You are an extraordinary young man, and your understanding of the law and of humanity goes beyond your years." The courtroom broke into quiet applause. It was not the loud clapping of celebration, but the soft, sincere sound of respect. People were smiling, nodding, whispering to one another. "He's incredible," someone said. "So humble, and so smart." The boy smiled gently, his eyes calm. He didn't look proud, just grateful. He turned to the judge. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said. "I only wanted to do my part." The judge nodded. "You've done far more than that," he said. "You've reminded us all what true justice looks like." When the court adjourned, people gathered around the boy, wanting to shake his hand and congratulate him. Even the opposing lawyer extended a hand. "You've taught me something today," he admitted. "Never underestimate anyone." The boy smiled modestly. "We all have something to learn from one another," he replied. Outside the courthouse, the sky was painted with the warm colors of sunset. The boy walked down the steps slowly, feeling the cool evening air on his face. He didn't carry the pride of victory, only the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had done what was right. His calm steps echoed against the stone walkway, and for a moment everything felt peaceful. News of the event spread quickly. Articles were written about the mysterious young genius who had stunned the courtroom. Videos of the hearing circulated online, showing clips of the boy speaking with calm authority, explaining complex points with simplicity and kindness. People across the country were inspired. They called him a prodigy, a role model, a reminder that brilliance could come from anywhere. But the boy didn't seek fame. He continued his studies quietly, always curious, always humble. He used his knowledge to help others, volunteering to assist those who couldn't afford legal help, guiding people through complicated paperwork, listening to their stories, and doing what he could to make things right. Months later, the same judge who had once mocked him invited him to speak at a law conference. The audience was filled with professionals, professors, and students. When the boy stepped onto the stage, he felt a moment of nervousness. But then he remembered the courtroom, the silence, the trust, the feeling of doing something meaningful. He spoke about justice, fairness, and compassion. He told them that laws were not just about rules, they were about people. He reminded them that knowledge without kindness could never bring real change. And as he spoke, the room grew quiet again, just like in the courtroom. People listened, truly listened. When he finished, the crowd stood and applauded. Some even had tears in their eyes. The judge smiled from his seat, proud and humbled at the same time. He had once mocked the teenager in open court, but now he was one of his greatest admirers. As the applause faded, the boy looked out at the audience. He didn't see faces, he saw possibility. He saw people who could make a difference if they remembered the power of fairness, honesty, and empathy. He smiled softly and said, "Anyone can be great, as long as they choose to care." Those simple words echoed long after the conference ended. They were shared in articles, quoted in speeches, and remembered by those who heard them. The boy's story became more than just a tale of intelligence. It became a lesson in humility, respect, and belief in oneself. Years later, when he finally became a real attorney, people still remembered that day in court when a teenager had stunned everyone. He never forgot the judge who changed his mind, the lawyer who learned to listen, or the people who began to see that brilliance could come from the most unexpected places. He continued his journey quietly, always striving to do what was right. And every time he entered a courtroom, he carried with him the same calm confidence and gentle smile, the same spirit that once transformed disbelief into admiration, mockery into respect, and silence into inspiration. The boy who had once been mocked for being too young had grown into a man respected not only for his mind but for his heart. And though many called him a genius, he always said the same thing: "I'm just someone who believes in justice." And with that belief, he continued to change lives, one case, one person, one act of fairness at a time.